Hello, I'm Wendy. Today I'm painting watercolour meadows. It's a painting demonstration with some tips for beginners. This is a photograph of mine of a local meadow that I took a week or so ago, mid-August. I'm always drawn to these sort of scenes because I do like the clutter and I like all the seed heads and the trees in the distance. Working in watercolour, it's quite difficult to paint around light areas, and especially when they're as cluttered as this. I do like masking fluid for these sort of scenes, and I use a lot of masking fluid when I'm painting scenes like this. It means that you can put on a very loose background and you can keep it, as I said, you can keep it loose, drop in different colours, do some experimentation. And when all that is dry, you can rub the masking fluid off and then finish the picture, putting more of the detail on, or as much or as little detail as you want. This is one of my interpretations of the scene, and I'm saying interpretations quite deliberately because I'm trying more and more as I'm painting not to copy photographs. I'm trying to put a sort of my own interpretation on them. And on this one, I didn't particularly want to have it so green. And my pictures recently have been very, very green. And I do like green, but I just wanted to get away from that in these paintings. So I've subdued the green and picked out more of the browns that were in there. I've clearly not gone into a lot of detail on the flower heads. I've kept those quite broad, and I do like the brown, the seeds that are forming on there. I do think that contrasts nicely with all the other colours. I wasn't especially keen on my background in this picture. I think the right hand side of the picture was a bit lost, and you'll see from my painting demonstration I've concentrated more on the left hand side of the picture, and in a demonstration just to show you how I tackled it. I hope you get something out of the video and you pick up some tips that you can incorporate into your own paintings. It's not a step-by-step, it's not a do what I do, but I'm hoping that it's going to be useful for you. I really enjoy painting these scenes, and think that's what it's all about, isn't it? Painting things that they give you pleasure. I did a very loose drawing of some of the hogweed and the grasses, and then I used masking fluid to put on the flower heads and the seed heads, as you can see. I know a lot of people don't like masking fluid, but it is extremely useful, and once you get the hang of it and get some nice masking fluid, then it's very easy to apply. I'm using, well, I'll put a link in the description box below to a video that you can look at if you're unfamiliar with using masking fluid. I'm using a couple of different brushes, a wider one and then a narrow one, which was an old rigger for doing the very fine lines. I put on the background wash of the sky, which will be probably something like ultramarine with a touch of light red. While that was still wet, then I dropped in some of the distant trees. These were the trees in the mid-distance, so they did have sort of a touch of green on them. I mixed cobalt blue, if I remember correctly, with some raw sienna. Yeah, cobalt blue and raw sienna will give you a nice sort of bluey green in the distance, and you can vary the amount of blue that you want to put in there if you want to knock them sort of further back. When you're working wet into wet like this, you can keep on adding colours, experimenting a little bit while the paint is still wet. As long as you put thicker colour on that you've got underneath, then you're not going to get runbacks and cauliflowers and horrible things like that. So here I did add some darker tones as it was just drying slightly, and then underneath I'm putting a mixture of the raw sienna again with just a tiny bit of the blue to cover the foreground. I do like to get all the white covered in a picture as soon as I can. I feel that then helps you judge everything else. It's difficult to judge colours and tones, I think, against white paper. I'm adding a little bit more warmth as I come forward, so it's mainly raw sienna there. I'm continuing to work wet into wet for the foreground at this stage, and I'm continuing to use the cobalt blue with raw sienna and possibly a bit of another yellow. I think well, in my opinion, the cobalt blue always gives you a very subdued sort of blue. I do like to use Prussian blue, but the Prussian blue is quite difficult to use and will always give you much brighter, stronger greens. And as I said, in this picture, I wanted to get away from those a bit and have everything a little bit more subdued. I'm working wet into wet with a round brush, adding some darker colour into it so that I'm getting tonal changes, changing my brush so that I get some different strokes and some sort of grassy strokes in there. And here I'm using a round brush to suggest more of individual leaves in there. But again, everything is still wet into wet. And because I've done the masking, I can be quite experimental and try and use all these different tones and colours, a little bit of brown in there. I use a special rubber for getting off the masking fluid here because there's quite a lot of it. It's I think it's called Mask Away. I've got it listed in the description below the video. It's a really nice rubber to use, and as you can see, it takes off the masking fluid really nicely. I'm showing you this, taking the masking fluid off, because I think this is what the stage people don't like. They see all these big white marks and I don't know, they just don't think it's going to work, and at this stage they might even bin it. I've been known to do that, but persevere, because once you start filling in those white spaces, then your picture is going to come together and you're going to get that nice soft wet into wet background that you put on, really enhancing your picture. Some of the hogweed was in flower and just had very small amount of shadow on the flowers. But some of them were going to seed, so I was picking out some of the colours that I could see, sort of browny greens that were on there, so I was putting on initially very light washes of these colours that I could see, and you'll see a little bit later on in the video that I darkened some of them as well. They were lovely colours. They're very browny greens. I think I mixed, I'm saying I think I mixed because I painted this a couple of weeks ago. It would have been burnt sienna with a little bit of ultramarine in there, probably maybe a bit of burnt umber. It's looking like that, just the earth colours, but doing some experiments, doing some mixing and trying to match some of the colours that were in there. I used a rigger brush and a dark mix of ultramarine and burnt sienna to do the thin stems, and maybe add a few more little darks on there as was needed on some of the flower heads. The hogweed that was still in flower had very green stems, and so you can see me here just mixing a green. It would have been, again, staying with the cobalt, it would have been a cobalt with raw sienna and possibly a little bit of a yellow in there. Those needed to be quite dark. I wasn't sure actually whether to leave them white or to put a bit of dark on there, so I did both and I think it worked fine. They could have been left white. Again, here it depends how detailed you want to go with the picture. I don't go into a lot of detail. I just wanted to add a few more darks here and there and to add a few more grass heads. It gives it a little bit more life, doesn't it, if you do a little bit of dotting around and a few sort of random strokes. I forgot to say that once I rubbed the masking fluid off, I did add a very light wash of raw sienna to some of those grasses and the stalks. Otherwise they would have looked too white. But I did, as I said, I forgot to say that at the beginning of the video. You may feel you want to tidy up a few areas with a little bit of white gouache or any other sort of body colour. That's perfectly fine. I didn't need to do a lot on this picture, just a tiny little bit I felt it needed in that corner there, and a few little odd dots of white. So this was the final picture. If you did like the painting that I did, then I hope this video will be useful in showing you how you can quite easily, in a way, quite simply, you can get these effects by using the masking fluid and using the soft backgrounds, and then afterwards, you know, putting on the detail with the flowers. It's got a sort of abstracty feel, which I quite like. As always, if you don't want to miss future content, then do subscribe to my channel. And it would be very nice to see some of the paintings that you do of meadows using lots of washes and masking fluid. So you can always post your work that you do on my Facebook group, and I will get back to everybody that posts on there.